Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will continue sharing the next developments in Diep's story, a story that remains unfinished, quiet on the surface yet heavy with emotion, where every character finds themselves standing in the midst of challenges they were never truly prepared to face. In the previous episode, tragedy struck without warning when James's father was involved in a serious accident. He was rushed to the hospital in a state of acute blood loss, his vital signs dropping rapidly, every passing minute filled with unbearable tension. The atmosphere in the emergency department was suffocating, doctors and nurses moved in and out continuously, surgical lights shone stark white, reflecting the urgency and fear etched clearly on every face. The line between life and death was painfully thin. A moment's delay could have sent everything down a completely different path. As the hospital faced a severe blood shortage, finding a compatible donor seemed almost impossible. The family was overwhelmed, and all alternative options proved powerless against time that refused to wait. It was in this critical moment that Diep appeared, a coincidence both cruel and profoundly meaningful. She was the only one whose blood type matched James's father. With no time for hesitation, no space for doubt or second thoughts, Diep made the decision to donate her blood, a quiet choice, yet one that carried the weight of a human life. As Diep lay on the donation bed, her face growing paler with each drop of blood transferred, the familiar scent of antiseptic and the steady hum of machines filled the room, intensifying the tension of the moment. This was not merely an act of saving someone's life. It was a silent sacrifice, a choice made without the need for witnesses or recognition, driven by one single purpose: to give James's father a chance to live. The surgery unfolded on a razor's edge. The hours of waiting outside the operating room felt endless. Each time the doors opened or closed, the hearts of those waiting seemed to pause for a breathless moment. When the doctor finally announced that the operation was over and James's father had temporarily pulled through, the heavy atmosphere eased slightly. Yet the relief was incomplete, as he remained in a deep coma and was transferred to intensive care, where even the smallest change could determine the next turn of fate. And James, throughout all of this, he remained completely unreachable. No calls, no messages. No one knew where he was or whether he even realized that his father had just faced death. His absence became a gaping void, suspended amid fear and anticipation, leaving behind unanswered questions and a quiet sense of unease that continued to spread, with no sign of fading. After hours of unbearable tension that seemed to stretch on endlessly, the doors of the operating room finally opened. The doctor stepped out, his face weary yet solemn, and announced that the surgery had been successful. James's father's life had been temporarily saved. Those words felt like a rare breath of air, allowing everyone to exhale after holding their fear in silence for so long. And yet, no one truly dared to feel relieved. The doctor himself emphasized that this was only the first step. James's father was still in an extremely fragile condition, requiring constant and close monitoring, where even the smallest change in vital signs could alter everything. Life had been held on to, but only just, fragile as a flickering flame before the wind, with no certainty about what would come next. James's mother, after an entire night of overwhelming tension without a moment of sleep, was completely exhausted. She sat motionless on a chair in the hallway, her eyes dulled, her trembling hands clasped tightly together as if trying to hold on to the last traces of consciousness. All night long, she had lived in fear and anticipation, listening to every footstep, every sound coming from the direction of the operating room. When she heard that the surgery was successful, she neither cried nor smiled. She simply let out a long breath, and her body seemed to give way, as though all her strength had been drained at once, leaving her barely able to remain standing. Diep wasn't sure when she had started staying by James's mother's side. She quietly helped her sit down, brought her water, and gently adjusted the coat slipping from her shoulders. Every movement was soft, slow, as if even the slightest force might cause the woman in front of her to collapse. While caring for her, Diep kept calling James. Each time she lifted the phone to her ear, her heart pounded harder, clinging to the fragile hope that there would be a response on the other end. But all she received were long, meaningless ringing tones, followed by a terrifying silence. That silence was not just the absence of sound, but a growing void of anxiety and unease, expanding with every unanswered call. Near dawn, when the sky outside the hospital was still washed in a pale gray, Diep had just returned from the intensive care unit where James's father was being monitored. She hadn't even had time to sit down when she suddenly heard a faint sound behind her. James's mother staggered as she tried to stand, barely able to say a word before her body went limp and she collapsed onto the cold hospital floor. Everything happened so fast that Diep froze in shock, her heart tightening painfully. She rushed forward, calling out to her in instinct, her trembling voice echoing through the quiet hospital corridor at daybreak. Without hesitation, Diep immediately called for a nurse. Rushed footsteps followed, the sound of a stretcher rolling across the floor, overhead lights flashing past the pale face of James's mother. She was taken to a private resting room, where nurses quickly checked her blood pressure and started in 4, diagnosing severe exhaustion and dangerously low blood pressure. The small room was bathed in dim yellow light, broken only by the steady hum of medical machines, cutting through the heavy silence. Diep sat quietly beside the bed, watching the woman lie still. The face that once appeared strong and unyielding now revealed deep fatigue and fragility after a night of enduring too much fear and worry. In that moment, Diep realized something with absolute clarity. Here, in the vast and cold hospital, amid the relentless chain of crises, she was the only one standing beside James's family, witnessing everything, bearing the waiting and the anxiety that should never have fallen on her alone. From that point on, Diep almost never left the hospital. Her days blended into the long, brightly lit corridors that never slept, the familiar scent of antiseptic, and the steady, rhythmic sounds of life-monitoring machines. She moved quietly between different wards, taking turns caring for both James's father and mother, as if even slowing down for a moment might allow everything to slip beyond control. Diep took the initiative to speak with the doctors, memorizing every instruction, every small precaution. She watched the numbers on the monitors closely, noticing the slightest changes that others might overlook, but which now carried immense significance for her. At times, Diep would stand for long moments in front of the department's information board, her gaze fixed on the cold, impersonal numbers that nonetheless determined a human life. Whenever a doctor stepped out, even for a routine check, she remained attentive, ready to catch every word. The tension did not show clearly on her face, but it lived deep within her breathing, in each careful, measured movement. Diep understood that even the smallest mistake could worsen James's father's condition, and she did not allow herself a single moment of distraction. Despite the lingering exhaustion from donating blood, despite occasional waves of dizziness, Diep stayed on. She did not complain, nor did she seek extended rest. Fatigue would arrive suddenly, only to be pushed aside by a simple thought: she could not leave yet. Not out of obligation, no one had asked her to stay. Not for recognition or gratitude, everything she did was quiet and unseen. She stayed simply because she could not walk away while things were still unresolved, while James's father still lay there, and James's mother had not yet truly recovered. James's father remained unconscious. He lay motionless on the hospital bed, surrounded by 4 lines, machines, and cold white lights casting down on his gaunt face. Diep often sat beside him for long stretches, saying very little, focusing instead on small, careful tasks. She adjusted the blanket when it slipped, gently wiped the sweat from his forehead with a soft cloth, every movement slow and patient. Sometimes, she would pause for a few seconds, watching the steady rise and fall of his breathing, as if reassuring herself that he was still there, still quietly fighting his unseen battle. These actions repeated themselves day after day, nothing dramatic, nothing that brought immediate, visible change. Yet Diep continued, again and again, until it became a habit formed in silence. In the intensive care room, where time seemed to move more slowly than elsewhere, her presence was gentle and unobtrusive, but never absent, never broken. Then, on a quiet morning, when the hospital was still wrapped in a rare hush, the early sunlight slowly filtered through the large glass windows, casting thin streaks of light across the floor. The light brushed gently over the hospital bed, over the face of James's father, now noticeably gaunter after so many days of lying motionless. In the intensive care room, everything seemed unchanged from previous mornings, except for the steady rhythm of machines, softly reminding that life was still being sustained, second by second. Very faintly, James's father's eyelids began to stir. The movement was so slight it nearly blended into his shallow breathing, easy to miss without close attention. Slowly, he opened his eyes, his gaze unfocused and unaccustomed to the light, carrying the confusion of someone awakening from a very long sleep. In that moment, everything around him felt unfamiliar, blurred, unnamed. At that time, Diep was bending over, arranging the familiar items on the small table beside the bed, things she organized every day, over and over, until the routine had become second nature. Suddenly, she sensed something different, as if a pair of eyes were watching her. Instinct made her pause. She turned around, and in that instant, her eyes met the newly opened gaze of James's father. His eyes were still tired and disoriented, filled with the lost expression of someone not yet fully returned to reality. He looked at Diep intently, as if it took a few seconds for the image before him to come into focus. When he realized that the person standing by his bed was Diep, he froze. The surprise in his eyes was unmistakable, unhidden, as though he could not believe that the first person he saw upon waking was her. In that brief moment, many emotions intertwined, yet all remained vague, not fully formed. Diep startled. Her heart began to race, her breath turning quick and uneven. The surge of shock, emotion, and concern rose all at once, leaving her no time to think. Almost instinctively, she turned and ran into the hallway to call for a doctor. Her voice trembled as she spoke, trying to stay calm while unable to conceal the emotion built up after so many days of anxious waiting. The hurried sound of footsteps shattered the stillness of the early morning. James's father had awakened. That truth marked a crucial moment after a long stretch of relentless tension. Yet along with his awakening, countless questions continued to hang silently in the air. How would he react when he realized that the first person he saw, the one who had stayed by his side throughout the most critical moments, was Diep, the young woman he had once strongly opposed, the very source of so many conflicts within the family? And James, at this decisive moment, where was he? Why, throughout all that time, had there been no calls, no messages, no way to reach him, even as his father stood at the edge of life and death? That absence remained an unanswered void, quietly casting a shadow over what should have been a more complete moment. James's father's awakening might be the beginning of a change, or it might only open the door to deeper, unresolved conflicts. Everything still lay ahead, as old emotions had yet to settle and the questions remained without answers.